Okay, Shabbat Shalom, live Skype fellowship, Hebrews chapter 11. This is the Sabbath, the Shabbat Shalom morning gathering. It is the 22nd day of the 11th Hebrew month. We're now going into Hebrews 11, the faith chapter, which is, of course, the perfect chapter to go over for Shabbat. Hallelujah. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good report. Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of Yah, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. Hallelujah. So right here off the bat, the author very clearly defines what faith is. It's hoping for things that you may not see, but that you know is there. And we know through our trust in Yah, through our complete surrender to Him, we know that He was the one that by His word framed all the worlds and everything that does appear. It's because of what He did, what He spoke. And now Yah's going to just sort of use the author to go through Hebrews 11 and show all these different examples of what true saving faith is. True complete and total surrender to Yah. Remember, there is a counterfeit faith. There's a faith of devils, which is talked about in the book of James, which is where they tremble at Yah, but they believe that Yah is real, but they don't obey Him. But now we're going to see what true faith is. This true obedient faith. And here we're going to go. Verse 4. By faith Abel offered unto Yah a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, Yah testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaks. Hallelujah. So we know Abel wanted to give the best. He gave the best. He gave the sacrifice that was not only the best, but the sacrifice that was supposed to be offered. Cain and Abel both knew from the sin of their parents that it was a blood sacrifice that needed to be offered, because when Adam and Eve sinned, of course, Yah had to slay an animal, which I believe was a lamb, and clothe them with the lambskins. The shedding of blood was needed, and so Abel offered a blood sacrifice, and Cain did not. Cain offered just what he thought he could do. He decided to go a different way, invent his own way, which was his vegetables. But Abel decided to do what Yah said, and that is one of the best examples of faith that you can possibly look at, because what is faith other than doing what Yah tells you to do? Believing in Him enough and trusting in Him enough to do what He says to do. And that's exactly what Abel did. Verse 5, by faith Enoch was translated, that he should not see death, and was not found, because Yah had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony, that he pleased Yah. Enoch pleased Yah. And of course, without faith it is impossible to please Yah. So we know Enoch had complete and total trust in Yah, to the point where he didn't even see death. He never died. Yah did not allow the wages of sin to come upon him, which is death, because he pleased Yah. Hallelujah. Of course, I believe he's one of the two witnesses, so I think he will eventually see death, but it will be in a way that just totally and completely glorifies Yah, just like Yahshua's death was. Verse 6. But without faith it is impossible to please Him. Hallelujah. For he that comes to Yah must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. So we see here that faith is two components. Number one, that you believe that He is. That you believe that He is who He speaks of Himself as throughout the Scriptures. That you believe He is. That He is the great I am. And not only that you believe that He is, but that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. And that's exactly what He does. Those who set their hearts like flint to against the enemy and tenderly toward Yah in seeking Him with everything that's in them, those are the people that get rewarded by Yah. He wants to be a God that's He is a God that wants to be sought after. He wants us to seek after Him, to pursue Him. This is why He wants us to study His Word. This is why He wants us on a daily basis to come before Him in our private prayer times and in our I love the statement that Keith Green made, where he said, if you're not going to bother to come to Yah every day, then don't bother coming to Him at all. So if we're not going to bother to believe that those who diligently seek Him are rewarded by him, then what's the point of serving him? Because the whole aspect of true saving faith is you are not cold, but you're hot. You're not lukewarm, but you're hot. You're seeking him with all that's in you. And you're doing it on a daily basis. And you're involving him in all your life. That is true faith. Verse 7, by faith Noah, being warned of Yah of things not seen as yet. Well, he didn't know that there was going to be a flood. He'd never seen a flood. That concept was completely alien to his mind and to all the minds of those who lived on earth at the time. Yet moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. So Noah believed in Yah even though he didn't see the evidence of any type of flood that had ever hit the earth before, but he believed in Yah and trusted in him. And so that was true faith. That's what caused him to, again, obey Yah, to do what Yah told him to do, which is building the boat. Verse 8, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should not after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. Which he should after receive for inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. And by faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is Yah. Abraham had no clue where he was going. He had never been to this land before. Yah basically told him to drop everything, to leave it, to uproot his entire family, and to leave everything that was familiar to him and everything that he had known, and go into this land that was very strange. A lot of strange people were there. He had no idea where he was going to go, and yet he obeyed. He listened to Yah, and he did that. And that is true faith. Abraham followed Yah whithersoever Yah led him. Hallelujah. Because Abraham knew that this life that he was living was not the end all or be all. He was looking toward that city whose builder and maker is Yah, which of course is the New Jerusalem. That's where his heart and his mind was focused on, the New Jerusalem. And so it was no big deal that he uprooted his family, and no big deal that he went into a land that he didn't know about, because that wasn't what life was about anyway. It wasn't about, getting a retirement plan and, building up his own legacy and his own family in the wealthy city of Babylon and which is where he and his family were from. He was willing to give all that up because his heart was in the New Jerusalem, not in the present life. Hallelujah. Verse 11, through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore so this is a very significant verse, because if you remember, when Yah visited Abraham and reminded him and his wife again in the tent that they were going to conceive, and about a year from the point that he visited them, Sarah at first she laughed. She laughed because she couldn't believe that was what was going to happen. But we see that Sarah overcame that, and she judged Yah faithful. She knew after that point, after that visitation, that she was going to conceive, that she was going to have that child, even though she was 90 years old, and no woman would ever have a child that old. But she believed in Yah. She judged him faithful. She knew that he was going to be, again, not only that he was, but he was going to be a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. And so Sarah trusted in that, and so she was given Isaac. Hallelujah. Verse 12. Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. That's referring to Isaac there, one as good as dead, because remember, one of the greatest acts of faith that Abraham had to endure was when Yah called Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. And Abraham obeyed, trusting and believing that Yah, if Yah had to, he would raise Isaac from the dead. And yet out of that act of faith, one as good as dead, Isaac, as many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore are innumerable. So out of Abraham's act of faith in giving up and sacrificing his son, Isaac, you get this huge multitude, this huge innumerable nation that sprung up from Isaac's loins. And that's a prophetic picture, of course, of Yahshua, who was as good as dead. Yahshua actually, unlike Isaac, Yahshua actually was sacrificed, and out of him, out of his sacrifice, you get an innumerable amount of children who are children of Yah, who are part of Israel. Hallelujah. These all, verse 13, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. They seek that new Jerusalem, that new heavens and new earth. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from which they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly, wherefore Yah is not ashamed to be called their Yah, for he hath prepared for them a city. Hallelujah. So you see, their whole hearts and minds and attitudes was not centered upon their present daily lives. It was centered upon what they were going to receive. This is very similar to Paul's words in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, when he talks about that great day in our future, Yom Teruah, when we're resurrected, and he says, wherefore always comfort one another with these words. In other words, our hearts and minds are to be on that great day when we stand before Yahshua, when we get our rewards, when we are with him for all eternity. It shouldn't be on our present day circumstances. And everything that we do right now should be based off wanting to please him and being called a good and faithful servant. And I think it's amazing how in verse 13 it says they all died in faith. They didn't receive the promises, but they saw them afar off. They knew they eventually they were going to inherit these promises. They knew eventually, way in the future, in eternity future, they would eventually stand before Yahshua in eternity. And so that was enough for them. That was enough for them to put their hope and trust in Yah. Hallelujah. Verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. So, okay, now the author is basically saying what I just talked about earlier, and that is he's comparing Abraham's act of faith and offering up Isaac to then Yah offering up his son Yahshua. Hallelujah. Of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that Yah was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. And of course, Yah didn't have to raise up Isaac from the dead because he provided himself a ram so that Abraham could sacrifice that instead of his son. But it was a picture, it was a figure of Yahshua, who was then raised up from the dead. Hallelujah. Which was the ultimate act of faith. Yahshua's sacrifice on the cross was the ultimate act of faith that any human could ever do. Is what Yahshua did. Hallelujah. Even exceeding that which Abraham did when he was willing to offer his son Isaac. Verse 20, by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. And by faith Jacob, so Isaac, he blessed Jacob and Esau. He by faith, by complete surrender to Yah, he knew how to bless both of his sons according to what Yah was going to do in both of their lives and in the descendants of his children. And then by faith, verse 21, by faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph, and worshipped, leaning upon the top of his staff. And remember, at first Joseph, if you go back to Genesis, Joseph at first said, "Oh no, Jacob, you're doing this wrong. You put your right hand upon my younger son, Ephraim, and you put your left hand on my older son, Manasseh, and that's not right. You need to put your right hand on my older son." And Jacob said, "No, no, no." And he crossed his arms, he crossed his hands, and he gave the greater blessing to the younger, Ephraim, and the lesser blessing to the older, Manasseh, even though that was reversed of how it should have been, because Jacob understood what Yah was trying to do. And so that's why that was a part of Jacob's faith there. Verse 22, by faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel, and gave commandment concerning his bones. So this was still several hundred years, a few hundred years, before the children of Israel were going to be delivered from the bondage of Egypt. And yet Joseph had enough faith in Yah's promises. He knew that eventually they were going to be delivered from Egypt and go back to the promised land. And so he said before he died, "Listen, make sure my bones are taken up with you." Because he believed and trusted that Yah was going to deliver them out of Egypt one day. Hallelujah. Verse 23. By faith Moshe, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents, because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. So his parents rebelled against Pharaoh and rebelled against the laws of the land in killing allowing their newborn boys to be killed, like the commandment of Pharaoh was, and they rebelled against that, and that was an awesome act of faith. And that allowed Moses to be preserved and to be brought up and to fulfill the destiny Yah had to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. Verse 24, by faith Moses, when he was come to years, when he came of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of Yah than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ, of Messiah, greater riches than the treasure in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. And by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Hallelujah. So right there, Moshe's first and greatest act of faith was to reject all of these riches and wealth that he was given, because he was basically considered the son of Pharaoh. And he rejected all that. He counted that as naught. Just like when Paul says, I count all these things as nothing compared to the cross of Christ and compared to Yahshua himself. And that's exactly what Moses did. Moses could have enjoyed the wealth of Egypt as a prince of Egypt for the rest of his life. But he gave all that up. Why? Because he trusted in Yahshua and in the destiny that Yahshua had called him in, rather than all these riches and wealth that had been given him. Hallelujah. Because like Abraham and his ancestors, he too did not keep his eyes on his present day circumstances. He kept his eyes on that future heavenly country to come. And he rather wanted to suffer afflictions with the people of Yah, which is what happened to him, than to continue in the very wealthy and comfortable lifestyle that he was in. That is true faith. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. Hallelujah. Verse 28, through faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. So he obeyed Yah, and he told everyone else to obey them by slaughtering that lamb and putting the blood upon their doorposts, something that had never happened ever in all the history of the world. And yet he believed Yah and did it, and they were all, not only was he protected, but all the children of Israel were protected because of that. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, which the Egyptians, essaying or trying to do, were drowned. Now that was an amazing story, because they're pinned up, trapped against the seashore of the Red Sea, which is several thousand feet deep. There was basically no way of escape. The Egyptian army was right behind them. But Moshe had the faith to listen to Yah, to rebuke the sea, despite the grumbling of the children of Israel, basically crying out in Moses' ears that they were about to all be slaughtered. And Moshe heard the voice of Yah, obeyed him, and that's how the sea was parted. Hallelujah. Verse 30, by faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. So remember the children of Israel, they followed the Levitical priests who marched around Jericho 7 times, and then on that 7th day, of course, they blew their trumpets and shouted out in a great shout, and that caused the walls to fall. Again, obeying what Yah told them to do, what the angel of Yah told them to do, so they could have that first victory to get into the promised land. That was something that, again, that had never happened before. Just like with the Red Sea, they'd never seen anything happen where, a bunch of people circled a city and started praising Yah, and the walls of this great city fell. But they believed Yah that that's what was going to happen. They did it, and that's exactly what happened. Hallelujah. By faith, the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace. So this woman who had lived as a prostitute all her life, she decided to make a break with that life that she had been living, and she said, you know what? I know that these men are from a great nation, controlled by the one true Yah. I choose to bind myself and my family with that nation and with that Yah. And so, risking her own life, she protected these two men. She laid down her own life and protected these two men when she could have very easily been killed for treason. She risked her own life and secured the victory that Israel would eventually have over Jericho. Hallelujah. And of course, she was then allowed, she and her family were then spared in the slaughter of Jericho, and she was allowed to be grafted into Israel. And what more? What shall I more say? Verse 32. For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, and of Barak, and of Samson, and of Jephthah. These were all, of course, judges of Israel. Of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, and stopped the mouths of lions. Reference to Daniel right there. Quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong. Hallelujah. Whenever we are weak, Yahshua's strength manifests to us. Waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the strangers. Women received their dead raised to life again. Hallelujah. This is what the prophet Elijah did. And others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. This is in reference to a lot of the people who were being killed even during the first century while this book was being written under Nero and the Caesars. And others had trials of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover of bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, they were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts, and in mountains, and in dens, and caves of the earth. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise, Yah having provided some better thing for us, that they, without us, should not be made perfect. So we who have received the promise of Yahshua, the full revelation of who Yahshua is and what he did, we get to join in with all of our ancestors, because without us, they're not complete. And that's a huge privilege and honor that is given to us. And of course, it follows, it's not that we're so special, it's just that it follows that principle that Yah loves, where the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And we're at the very last, we're in the latter half, the last generations, and so that's why he puts us first. And that's why these people, although they were far exceeding us in much of their faith, they are not perfect without us. We have to join with them for the whole body of Messiah to be made perfect and complete. Hallelujah. But this chapter should definitely inspire within us to strive for the type of faith that our ancestors had. And what does it come down to? And that is that in every one of these circumstances, they didn't look at what their present circumstances were, whether it was poor and bad or whether it was rich and wealthy, but they kept their focus and eyes upon that city to come, that eternal city to come, or that time when we stand before Yahshua. And that's why every single day of our lives, our heart's cry and our heart's prayer should be, Yahshua, how can I live today, this very day, so that when I do stand before you in the future, you're able to say of me this day, well done, my good and faithful servant. So teach me to be good and faithful today, because every day we should be living in light of that moment when we stand before Yahshua and he rewards us. Because that's what our ancestors did, and that's what true faith is all about. And that's what allows us to believe in things that are not seen. We don't see our rewards yet. None of us have ever seen Yahshua. None of us have ever stood before his throne and been given the rewards that we can't even comprehend at this point. But we believe and trust that that's where our hope is to be with him for all eternity. And that is faith. That is how our lives should be lived. And in that way, we're given the gift and the ability to obey him, to love him, because we trust and hope in that time when we will be with him forever. Hallelujah. And we don't draw back to our old lives and to perdition. Just like, Moses, he had the opportunity where he could have just, fallen back into Egypt and enjoyed those riches, but he didn't. He endured and he forsook Egypt and esteemed the riches of Christ far, far greater. Hallelujah. All right, that is Hebrews chapter 11. Shabbat Shalom.